racism is morally wrong. I think we can all agree on that. It can also be really funny, but on the whole, it's not something you should be proud of. Now, I live in the blessed UK, where you would be astounded at what can be considered a hate crime. From Facebook statuses to teaching your dog to lift his paw when you say Zeke Heil. Seriously, I've got my fingers crossed for you on that one, Dankula. But rather than racism being an all-round no-no, Riley Dennis has blessed us with his elongated facial structure to teach us how some racism is worse than others. Or how some racism is better than others. I don't know, you decide.
Look, before we get into this video, I just want to note that obviously I'm really white.
You say obviously, but I clearly saw you check your skin just then. Looks like there's a whole myriad of things you're confused about, old boy.
And when I talk about white people, I don't mean it in a those white people kind of way, like I'm somehow detached from that.
Really? Fucking hell, it's weird when Riley stops pretending to be different from everyone else, isn't it? Throws me right off my game.
When I say white people, I mean myself included. I just don't want it to come across as like, I'm one of the good ones.
Well, you do. I mean, that's actually the whole point here, isn't it? You might as well change your channel name to Woke White Boy.
Because I'm still learning how to combat racism and white supremacy myself.
Just don't be racist, Riley. It's easy. If you start persecuting people for their views and beliefs, you're being a fucking fascist. And as a white person, you're pretty much assumed to be one anyway.
So, I hope that makes sense. Anyway, the point of this video is that not all white people bullshit.
Yeah, when the social justice dialogue starts targeting people for being white and some people actually feel the need to highlight the fact that you're making a generalization about a whole group of people based on the one aesthetic feature they share, that's bullshit. And for fuck's sake, Riley, can you finish what you're saying before you jump cut? Your editing is embarrassing.
If you don't know what I mean, let me give you an example. Let's say a person of color experiences some kind of racism from a white person.
What do you mean, let's say? I was under the impression that happens on a day-to-day basis, Riley. That racism is just as prevalent as ever, Nazis are everywhere, and President Trump caused Hurricane Katrina.
In frustration, they say, white people are horrible. At this point, you can expect some kind of white person to pop up out of the bushes and scream,
do you mind? I'm trying to masturbate.
Not all white people. You shouldn't generalize us like that. That's reverse racism.
Well, reverse racism would just be not being racist, so that is a stupid thing to say. It was, however, racist. And why did you laugh? Wouldn't that be the aforementioned combating racism that you're still learning to do?
These white people, the ones who constantly scream, not all white people, and reverse racism.
Right, so you started the video by saying when you say white people, you also mean you. And then go on to specify these white people. It's so sad that I'm used to your bullshit, Riley.
Argue that making a generalization about white people is just as bad as making a generalization about people of color.
Well, it is. Otherwise, you're basically arguing that people should be treated according to the color of their skin. Riley, I don't know how you're not hearing yourself.
I think that saying white people are horrible is just as bad as saying black people are horrible. On like a total surface level, you might think, yeah, that makes sense. Those statements are both generalizations about a race.
You know, I love that he switches to monochrome for these bits. It's like he's separating the colors.
But if you look just a little bit harder at the cultural, social, political, and historical context that these phrases are set in,
you'd only do that to justify your racism, Riley. You're gonna say, well, a lot of black people were enslaved fucking ages ago, and some people still feel oppressed today, so that makes you a prick. And I've got to go, okay. Like this debt has been passed down from generation to generation, which is really weird because my ancestors paid for their slaves up front.
It's pretty easy to see that they are not equivalent statements. I mean, black people in the US were slaves, and then they were considered 3/5 of a person, and then they lived under Jim Crow segregation laws.
Yeah, and my folks had a bit of a problem with the Vikings. We don't say racist shit about Norwegians, probably because we had a more recent issue with the Germans, but I don't get why this has any bearing on what makes something racist in the current year.
And even today, they still experience systemic racism on a daily basis.
Riley, the Jews were oppressed. Having affirmative action in the NAACP isn't oppression. Why does history only matter to you when it furthers your narrative? Oh, never mind. I answered my own question.
Prejudice and discrimination that was built into our institutions and systems didn't go away overnight with the Civil Rights Act of 1965.
You could have just said the Civil Rights Act. Stop showing off. Anyway, if the act of shoehorning diversity into any given space for the sake of diversity is discrimination, then I agree, fucko.
Racism and, by extension, white supremacy both still have a deep hold on this country. country. To be a person of color in the US today means to live under a system that was not only not built for you, but was built to harm you.
Harm you? What the fuck? Why would... I mean, we're talking way back when here, aren't we? So why would anyone build a system to harm their own slaves? That's like mugging yourself.
If you don't believe that people of color are marginalized and oppressed in a way that white people are not, you're just being willfully ignorant at this point.
Says the guy who's willfully ignoring sports, academia, institutions founded to help black people in those fields, and 2 terms in the White House.
So I'm gonna assume that we can all agree on this. If we can't agree, I don't think I'm gonna be able to convince you, but there will be some links in the description if you'd like to challenge your worldview with some facts and statistics.
One analysis on racial discrimination in hiring, and a whole bunch of news articles. Which, considering I've been seeing things like, can my children be friends with white people? You can't really use mainstream media as a genuine citation. Even though I did just then. It's confusing, Riley.
Anyway, the point of all of this is just to give you some background for why generalizing statements about white people versus generalizing statements about black people are not equivalent.
Yeah, it's good to round back to your initial stupidity, but here's a mind blower for you, Riley. Racism is actually pretty inclusive. It's for everyone. I mean, you want equality, it's right there, buddy.
They don't exist in a vacuum. Black people in the US have been oppressed and continue to be oppressed in ways that white people will never fully be able to understand.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you decided to do a 10-minute video on it then. And I'm the ignorant one.
So when you say something in 2017, knowing everything that has happened up until now, your words live in the context of this time period, in this culture, in this political context. They can't be separated from that.
So what you're saying is, the only way the black man can feel equal to the white man is if we all stop bitching about the past. What do you know? Riley unintentionally made sense.
So let's say you're a white person and you say, black people are horrible. In a greater context, you are a member of a group that oppressed black people for a long time and continues to do so today.
So now you're generalizing all white people through space and time as proof they shouldn't generalize when it comes to race. You are monumentally dumb.
I can already hear the white people chiming in saying that they weren't alive during slavery, so they shouldn't be responsible for it.
You say that like it's a stupid thing to say, but what's really stupid is that it needs to be said.
And like, sure, you're not directly responsible for slavery, but you continue to benefit from the oppression of black people, which has had its roots in slavery. That's a fact.
Oh, that explains my membership to the White Only Club, where housing and education are free, but you can't dance. And saying that's a fact doesn't make something a fact, and that's a fact.
And I know white people get really sensitive about this, and I get it. I used to be in middle school too.
Ooh, sick burn from our dog there. Except no one believes you used to be in middle school. Still are, maybe.
And I wanted to believe that I lived in a system that was fair and equal and didn't value me over someone else just because of the color of my skin.
And then you met Riley Dennis.
But then I grew up and I realized that racism was still very much alive.
Oh, don't get me wrong. It'll never die. I'm just saying it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Racists are generally shunned, and you'd know that if you spent any time in the real world.
So I'm not saying that white people need to hate themselves or have guilt over this. I just think we need to recognize our role as people who have benefited from racism.
You're still not going to explain how then. You're just gonna keep saying it. Man, there is no way I'm getting through this entire video.
And who are a part of a group that has oppressed and continues to oppress black people.
Yeah, let's judge individuals as a group based on the color of their skin. Seems fine.
And then we need to work to fight against that. And part of what that means is that when you, as a white person, say black people are horrible,
the point was when a black person says it about white people, but fuck it. Just goes to show even Riley can't follow his own batshit ramblings.
Your words are just perpetuating the oppression of black people that white people have been doing for a long time.
Well, not these black people. This is a fresh batch. They haven't faced any of that oppression. Sounds like you're the one who's perpetuating it.
You're continuing that racist cycle. You're adding fuel to the fire. On the other hand, if a black person says white people are horrible, it doesn't have that weight behind it.
Oh, shit. So you're saying being the subject of racism is yet another thing the white man is trying to steal. I get it now.
Power dynamics are completely different. It doesn't perpetuate systemic racism. It doesn't result in the institutional oppression of white people.
Riley, none of them do that. Saying a particular group of people is horrible isn't a magic spell that affects their income. Otherwise, everyday feminism would have gone bankrupt and you'd be out of a job.
It's just an expression of anger against an oppressor group. That's all there is to it. The two statements don't carry the same weight or historical context.
Except racism isn't based on history and society. It's the prejudice and discrimination of someone from a different race. Nowhere in the definition does it say, unless you're black. Though, give it time, I guess.
For centuries, white people people insulting black people has led to their enslavement, disenfranchisement, and oppression.
Insulting black people caused slavery? How in the living That's it. I'm done. I'm fucking done. You can't generalize white people when we've got a spastic like this lumped in with us. He's bringing the average way down. He's basically an advert for contraceptives. Well, I don't know about you guys, but that one made my brain hurt. I think I've earned a bottle of Captain Morgan's dark rum for getting through this video, but no one's selling it anymore because of his involvement in the slave trade. Thanks for watching, guys. Please consider becoming a patron or I'll do another Riley Dennis video. And check out the Drunken Uncle merchandise so you can cover your saggy body with this. The links are in the description, and remember, it's not racist if someone laughs.